thanks everyone for like bearing with and overcoming the technical difficulties. I really appreciate it. So I think let's maybe get started with a little introduction and just a kind of brief overview of who you are and where you are in your careers and where you are in the US. Beau, why don't you get us started?
Ooh, I started making in, well, my name is Beau Hannam, everybody. Hello. I started making in, I think it was 2003. I started a course at Gillette Guitars in Sydney, and then I ended up working there after, many years. And then I moved to America in 2013 and live in Colorado. And yeah, I build guitars and ukuleles, and I probably made more ukes and American guitars just because I can only have time to make what people order, and people keep ordering ukes. So, but I want to get back into more guitars because it's the same amount of time building each one, but half the money for a uke. So
And you do repair work too, right?
Reluctantly, I don't advertise it. I have a few kind of cards around town, but it's more sort of as much repair work as I do, it takes away from building. So everyone gets annoyed.
I'd say you're also a YouTuber.
Yeah, I haven't posted anything for about a month and a bit. Although I have been sick and been away for 2 weeks visiting Ryan. And I went away from my wife's work. But yeah, YouTube is, yeah, it's a lot of work for, 80 cents a day. It's all about the Benjamins.
Yeah, man. When I recently got monetized on YouTube, and I was like waiting for that first day, the like projected revenue, and it was like 57 cents. Damn it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why people, I mean, it doesn't matter if you've got 1,001 subscribers and you can get monetized, but you could have 1 million subscribers and only 100 people actually watch your videos, so you're not going to earn any money. But if you have one cat video that goes viral, then you're doing well. So
let's come back to YouTube in a little bit.
yeah.
Ryan, why don't you go ahead and give us your one paragraph life story?
One paragraph, huh? All right. Yeah, Ryan Gerber, and I live in Ohio in the U.S. and started building guitars in 2009, which was just for a hobby. Had some kind of downtime or free time on my hands and needed a new project. So I had been playing guitar for a while, and I thought, hey, that would be cool to try. So yeah, I bought the William Cumpiano book and started with that, and set a plastic table up in my mom's basement and bought a few clamps, and took a year and a half to make that first guitar, and it hooked me, and then yeah, just started buying tools and setting up different shops in whatever house I was living in at the time, and just worked hard at it, and then yeah, so it's been about 10 years since I've been building guitars.
Has that always been a solo endeavor?
Just working by myself. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow. Martin, you're someone who I consider to be like a bona fide luthier. Like you're just working musician.
Can I get that in writing?
It's like the family business. Like every like Luthierie seeps from your every pore, it would seem.
Is that what the smell is? Like,
I think that's the kefir that Ryan's wife's been making.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know about that, but certainly I grew up with a lot of music in my house. My dad was a professional musician for his whole career, and both my parents played. My brother is a musician, so it was just always part of my life. And then I've been an active player for, God, I don't know, almost 30 years. I started making guitars. I got sort of an apprentice level position with Joe Veillette in Woodstock in 2000. And I was at his shop for, God, it was 15 years. We built almost 1,000 guitars while I was there. And I was doing kind of variously through the years, just about every part of what needs to be done in a working shop, except like the bookkeeping and kind of administrative work like that. But everything from like all the front-facing client relations, training new people, maintaining the machines, product development, shipping, receiving, ordering, all the final setup and assembly. I mean, it's just like, it was quite a while there. And then in 2015, I left that shop, and I've been working out of my own shop since then, although I'd started making my own guitars as far back as 2005 on the side, working like nights and weekends at Joe's shop, which he was very kind to let me to do. Now it's about 50-50, my work life, between new instruments and repair and restoration type stuff, which I feel, unlike a lot of people, I feel like actually it's a bit of a schizophrenic way to live in terms of the workflow and the use of space in the shop and all that sort of thing. But I really have sort of embraced the repair part of my work life. And I feel like it's, first of all, you never, ever, ever look for work. Work looks for you. The moment you start doing repair, it's just, you don't have to advertise. You just do a couple jobs, and next thing you know, there's people waiting for you to fix their guitar. And also, it really has informed the way I build quite a lot.
Sure. Yeah. Getting into luthiery is something, how do you become a professional luthier is a question I get asked a lot. And it's often a difficult one to answer because, I think lots of people, like Ryan, it just starts as a hobby, and then you would just work hard, and your instruments get better and you get more well known, and then for other people it might be a function of having a family business or being a musician and needing to know how to fix and repair your own instruments. But Beau, what was your why? How did the guitar thing come into your life?
All my books are down here. I also got the William Campiano book. Oh yeah, it's down there. There's a little inscription, the date when I bought it, which I'm glad I put in. But I was at a secondhand book sale in Balgowlah near Manly in Sydney, and my girlfriend at the time found that book, and she brought it up to me and said, "Is this something you'd be interested in?" And I went, "Yes." And I just never thought about people that, I don't know, I thought guitars just popped out of the forest or something. I hadn't thought about it. I just thought factories make guitars and stuff. I didn't realize there was such a thing as hand-built guitars. And then that changed, that moment, like, just changed my life, really. I was studying philosophy and theology at the time, I think. And then when I finished that, but while I was finishing that, I was reading that book cover to cover. I didn't really understand it. I don't have the brain like Ryan does, where he can just work through something and make a guitar. I need guidance. And so when I finished studying philosophy, I studied at Chile Guitars, and it was, I think at the time it was 110 a day. And I was working in a bookshop at the time, and I was just putting all my money into Chile Guitars. And so I think I built 3 guitars there, triple O, double O, and a resonator. And then I just started spending my free time there and sweeping up and helping out and putting in bridge pins, and not bridge pins, strap pins and stuff like that. Just being handy around the workshop. And then eventually I'd get paid in wood or something, and then you know, you sort of work your way up, and I eventually ended up teaching there, which was great. Teaching is what Martin was saying about learning other things through repair. Teaching is also another avenue, which is amazing. I love it. It's some students are frustrating, like some repairs are frustrating, although some building elements are frustrating too. But yeah, it's, I think a full luthier, what you mentioned before, is someone who can teach and do repair and knows at least finish work. Even if they don't do it themselves, they can just know how to buff and stuff. Yeah, it's been a sort of a long journey, but I'm glad I am where I am. I wish I'd started earlier though, because I was about, I don't know, 20, no, almost 30 when I found that book. So I wish I'd started, 10 years before that, just straight out of high school. I assume I'd be a better luthier now.
Are you a player at all, Beau?
I can play. I sort of improvise every instrument that I do a sound sample of and stuff, but now I don't really have time to play. I don't know. I guess I do because Martin does, but I don't. The only thing I play is 5 or 10 minutes to do the sound sample and just a quick kind of, listen, and then, intonation and stuff like that. But once that they're all shiny, I don't want to touch them. I hate touching my instruments. once they're shiny, I just want to send them away, and hopefully that'll be it.
Ryan, what's your background like before guitars? Because your work is some of the most immaculate work that I've seen. And it doesn't strike me that kind of just like arrives out of the ether just through hard work. I'm curious as to what your background is.
Yeah. Yeah. So a few thoughts. I was also at 30 when I kind of started the journey, Beau. So I'm right there with you. And for me, it kind of came out of nowhere. I don't know where. I'm trying to think of where the first original thought came to me that it would be fun to try and make a guitar. I had played guitar for some time since college. Really had fallen in love with the acoustic guitar in particular. But I guess maybe to answer your question a little bit better, my dad is a mechanic, still is. He's pushing 70 and still fixing motorcycles. He's been a motorcycle mechanic his whole life. So growing up for me as a teenager, I was in the shop with him. I had a dirt bike and a four-wheeler, and that was a big part of my life that I really enjoyed. So I was making repairs, working with him a little bit. I didn't really fully grab a hold of the mechanic side of things and becoming a mechanic, which I don't know why. Because it would be really interesting work. But my grandpa was a woodworker. And so I also would watch him make Lazy Susans and, little plates that spin and you can put spices or, different things in the rack. He would make those by the hundreds, and chairs and just kind of like basic woodworking things, knickknacks and practical items. So, yeah, so I grew up watching him work with wood, working with my dad, and I think I picked the cleaner of the two, right? You don't have to have oily hands at the end of every day, just glue and sawdust. But so that's, yeah, maybe that, I'm sure that nurtured me into kind of this kind of work. I've always really enjoyed working with my hands, fixing things, making things, drawing. For a little while I was into doing like realistic pencil drawings from photos. So I think I just enjoy the detailed sort of fine motor work that takes patience, and so I guess it's just a good fit in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's I was really curious about that because like I said, your work is just so just so perfect. I remember seeing one of your guitars at the North American Guitar in when they had their London showroom, and I believe it had one of the really delicately carved rosettes, which it reminded me of the kind of work that I used to see Irvin do. And so funnily enough, I put a shout out on Instagram just saying that I was doing this call, and that question kept coming up, was, you know, can you ask Ryan about his rosettes, and you know, where that kind of idea came from, and how long those things take to execute, because they're just so like, that's not easy to do that kind of work.
Well, I think with the right tricks and in the right order, it's not hard. It's really it's not as complex as doing actual like chip carving. That's not what it is. You know, I think that's probably a considerably more difficult. What I'm doing with the carved rosette is I'm building the rosette as a piece separate from the guitar, right? Which that right away, it makes it a lot easier, because you're not working on a finished soundboard. You know, when Irvin's doing like chip carving, or I know Leo has done some of that, which is just amazing. You're working in what you hope to be your finished piece, right? So mistakes are, you don't want to really butcher something up. So yeah, when you're building a piece off of the guitar, you're building the piece just by itself. I think that makes it easier. And just, it's like anything else. When you develop the right process and the right order of how you do things, and you do it a couple times, I think it gets much easier, and you know, you get a better result. So, are you using edge tools for those? So to do the faceting, I'm just using files. Yeah, I'm not even. I'm not using. I've been calling it a carved rosette. It's maybe a little bit misleading. I'm actually just using the StuMac little 1/4-inch files to do the facets. And what also helps is that I have, when I do, the piece itself is made up of individual little tiny pieces. So once I have those little pieces assembled, I have guidelines for where the facets should be. Right. Which makes things a lot easier, because you just, you put you file the facet to the mark, and you're good to go. It's really not that bad. It's time consuming to put all those little pieces together. Yeah. It's funny, because I went through the same thing that Tom went through when I first saw one of those. Just like all the different facets and angles and planes and things. And, because of the way I learned, like, Joe's shop was very much not about like learning chops with hand tools. It was more akin to sort of a production type of shop, where you would build a fixture, you would tool up to make a thing, and you'd use a machine to make the cut, and it was predictable, repeatable, etc. And so my mind immediately went to like something kind of like one of those chainsaw file holders, you know what I mean, that holds a file at a certain angle, and then it can travel in a plane. And I thought, if you had that, and you had some kind of little gizmo that would rotate, index the rosette, then you could just cut and rotate, and rotate, you know what I mean? Let's do that. So I was trying to figure out, like, if there was something like that behind it. That would be nice. If you want to help me develop that fixture or process, that'd be great.
I can totally see Martin like getting off this call now and firing up the mill and just be like, I'm gonna come up with some tooling that makes that. Well, Burton probably already figured that out, and just put it on a shelf because it wasn't interesting enough for him or something. I don't know. Probably so.
I actually thought you used a milling machine with one of those kind of jeweler's devices that rotate, but have that at an angle, and you just sort of go back and forth or something. But the files are simple and brilliant.
One thing that I think we should talk about, and one thing, it was something that Martin raised, was longevity. And longevity versus longevity versus performance of an acoustic instrument. And that kind of like ties into for me at least, the idea of like a lifetime of learning. You know, the guitar is so complex, and we're never, well, rarely are we building the same guitar twice, so we're always learning something and always developing. And you know, I think a good professional should always be trying to add tools to their toolbox. So longevity of an acoustic instrument, and maybe Martin, because you've come up with some really interesting solutions in terms of, you know, adjustable necks, and doing the amount of repair work that you do. Perhaps you want to get us started on thoughts around longevity.
Well, it's, you know, I feel sort of like it's sometimes a problem for me as a builder, honestly, because, you know, I get enough repair coming in, and these are guitars of every make, model, and era. So it'll be everything from like 1930s Gibson guitars through like 50s, 60s Martins, and then Taylors from 3 weeks ago, you know. And there is, in that range, generally a, you know, a variety of approaches to construction. But as a safe rule of thumb, you could say that most of them are built more substantially than most modern luthier made guitars. And, you know, some of them are built with like twice as much material in every place as many modern luthier made guitars. I've had Gibson J200s from the 60s that had these giant braces and like these big thick tops that were like 0.150 thick or something. And they had, like, basically they were suffering from the same issues of box distortion and geometry that brings in lots and lots of flat top guitars to repair shops. So I'm sort of subject to these dual kind of pressures on my self-confidence, because one of them is I go to guitar shows and I play all these just phenomenally responsive lightweight guitars with these like 0.080 thick tops and little skinny braces, and everything is just like minimal and explosive and loud, and there's all this bass and there's all this everything, and it's like, wow, I wish I could do that. But then I also handle these guitars with all this material and they're still failing, and sometimes not after that long, you know. I'm resetting a neck on a Martin from like the mid 80s right now, you know, and those guitars are kind of starting to come due for like that era starting to be a common era of Martins to reset. And I look at it and there's all this material and it's still like the geometry is returning to failure. So I can't reconcile the two. And so I'm stuck between like my awareness as a repair person of the way all these things go wrong, and then my desire to try to make my guitars lighter and louder and bassier and all these things that the market wants. And I don't really, it's like, it's very hard to find a spot in the middle. But so and the result is that I'm building my guitars maybe not as lightly as I should to serve the current taste, but I want them to be durable as instruments. Mm-hmm. So I don't really feel confident in like going further and going too far, you know. And then on top of that, you know, there's a school of building that is like really over engineering, in my opinion, things like neck joints with like epoxy and, you know, crossing carbon into the neck block and stuff like that, which makes an incredibly stable joint, but the joint failure is not at the heart of the problems that require neck resets. So the joint is like your fail-safe. It's the place you can fix the problem, but it's not the source of the problem, you know? And so when you have a neck joint that can't be disassembled, to some extent, you have a guitar that's sort of doomed to not really be very playable at some point in the future, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a difficult one, because like you say, the market pressures and the kind of tastes and the trends that we're seeing don't tally with the historical idea of how long an instrument should last. And it's a very difficult line to strike, and I think, like you say, that it's kind of at odds with each other. And it's it's an interesting one. So I'm interested in kind of approaches to kind of combat that, or to kind of to help find a middle ground. And I mentioned the adjustable neck, for example, that you implement. How much of that is to do with longevity, or how much of that is to do with just ease of changing the playability of your instrument?
Initially, it was about like letting the player change the action, because at the time that I started doing that, I was building these pretty odd guitars that had tail pieces. They were flat tops, but with tail pieces and high bridges and offset sound holes and lattice bracing, and just like every possible different thing you could put into one guitar. And the adjustable neck for that, it was like a feature, but I'm making flat top guitars now with pin bridges, and I wanted to retain that largely because of the sort of future service aspect. But it also lets you do a handful of other things with the guitar that I feel are valuable. Like you can play with the saddle height on the assembled guitar, like most of the time you're done with the guitar, it's painted, you're setting it up. There's only one saddle height that is correct to make the action what you want it to be. And then you just hope that you've braced the top for the string load and the rotational load and everything, so it'll do what you want. But if you can vary the saddle height on the finished guitar, you can play with the amount of rotational load on the top, and then just put the neck wherever it needs to be for that. You know what I mean? And so you can, there's just this little extra measure of control at the end of the process, which is kind of neat, Or like I had a client who wanted to go from 12s to 11s, and I made him a taller saddle, so the 11s could have a little bit more load on the top and try to keep the guitar sounding like it was meant to sound with the lighter gauge,
Was the end result similar? Like
it was, yeah. I mean, I can't say it was exactly the same, but it was pretty close. Closer than I expected for the change.
With
Mark, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Martin, is your adjustable neck design, is it a pivoting adjustable neck or a telescoping?
It's sliding, yeah. So it's an axial motion that's roughly perpendicular to the strings. It's not exactly perpendicular. It's parallel to the side of the box. So it's basically a mating pair of aluminum parts. It was originally the female part in the first iteration of it was actually that Veritas double T-track that they sell for jigs and fixtures. It was just like an aluminum extrusion that had a T-shaped inner profile and then a little lip on the outside to hold it in place. But I started getting the machine for me because I wanted some dimensions different, but that's more or less the idea.
I can't remember if I was talking to Ryan about this when I visited him a couple of weeks ago. I didn't quite make it to you, Martin. I'm sorry.
No worries. It was a bit of a detour.
Yeah. That I was mentioning to someone, it could have been Jake McClay, about a small amount of me wanted to make a instrument or a model of instrument that was designed to fail but sound amazing for 2 to 5 years, just for like a studio instrument. And maybe in the price you sort of build in a new top or something, comes with a new top, the second top, and you could do that and not bind the top perimeter. It'd probably be easy. Might be a good idea. I don't know. It just sounded like a lot of work. I was looking at Samoji's how he does it. He puts the carbon fiber into the head block, and I thought, if that's the only problem, then that's good. But then if it isn't, then you've just built a fancy Spanish heel, basically, i.e. it's just not possible to do anything with it other than cut it off. You sort of need a new neck, which is a real problem. So I do bolt-on necks, and most of my upper, like the head block and the upper bout, especially the upper transverse brace, is really, really overdone. over-engineered, especially on ukes, which I sort of disregard everything from below the sound hole up. So everything's really overbuilt on a uke, on my uke, and then everything below that's super light. And on steel strings and classicals, or classicals is the same as a uke, and steel strings is kind of, I leave the top part of the X as fat as possible, and then it goes in about 1/4 of an inch deep into the linings, solid linings. And my latest sort of desire is to try the Trevor Gore kind of pocket thing with the bolt. It's sort of a non-glued neck, and that seems to be the best of both worlds. It seems like rock solid and really easy to fix when it needs that to happen. So I'm yet to jig up for that. You know,
I'm not sure what that is. What?
It's quite it's something that's kind of taken off in the last couple of years. It's like a lot of builders are doing that, where you have like a secondary like a block underneath the fingerboard extension.
Okay, sure.
That bolts into the underside of like an L section.
Dion does that, right?
Yes. Yeah. He's kind of popularized it, I would say.
Yeah, I've worked on a couple like that. I mean, the Taylor NT neck has a similar aspect.
Exactly. Yeah.
So.
Do you do that, Tom? That neck joint?
Yeah, I've been doing that for the last couple of years, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
There we are.
Nope. I've also started doing it. I'm guilty as well.
So do you like it?
Yeah, I like it.
I do too. I think it makes a load of sense. And it's fairly uncomplicated to do. I think it supports the fretboard intersection better than just, I used to just glue the extension onto the soundboard, which, works fine, but I think this is just a little bit more stable for the entire fretboard. And being able just to, and just being able to pull it off, whenever you want in 5 minutes is so nice for fret work. And
yeah, that's amazing.
I lost, Martin, I lost you when you were talking about your adjustable neck. Did I miss anything? You had said that you were using the Veritas adjustable T-track to start. Did I miss anything else? I think an adjustable neck. Yeah, I think an adjustable neck is really intriguing, and I've done quite a bit of sketching and thinking about it, wanting to try it at some point.
Well, listen, this applies to all of you guys here. I was talking with Richard Hoover at Woodstock like 4 years ago or something. And I don't know if you've all had the chance to meet Richard, but he's like the sweetest human you'll ever meet. And he said this thing, we were talking about ideas and, just everything. And he said, when you close the door, it closes both ways. So, the more protective you are of your thing, the less likely you are to get anything from anybody. And I really took that to heart. I kind of sort of adopted it as a bit of a mantra for the way I work. And so I have already, with several other people, Joel Michaud and Benoit Lavoie, and at least one of the guys from the Mile End bunch, I have a Dropbox folder, and it's got photographs of the parts. It's got my process notes for like the milling operations that I do. It's basically everything that I have that I can possibly share about the neck joint, I have in a shareable form. So if any of you guys wants to see it, just tell me and I'll send it to you, because there's like a very low percentage chance that exactly what I do will work for you. You're going to have to adapt it or modify it in some way, I suspect.
Yeah.
And even if you did exactly the same thing, your guitar is still your guitar, and my guitar is still my guitar. Sure. And it's not like, if anybody's buying my guitar because of the neck joint, then I'm not doing my job correctly, So, it's just, as far as I'm concerned, it's just like open source,
It's something that I definitely, I mean, I think that's amazing. I really applaud you for doing that, and I will be hitting you up for the
Yeah, no question.
for that Dropbox. But I think it's something that I really appreciate, and I've said many times on interviews like this, just how open and supportive the community is, and you know, the fact that the term you used, open source, I think that's really really accurate. And it's just, you can almost see the trajectory of the quality of work coming out from the whole industry, just rapidly ascending. It's really amazing to watch. It's kind of frightening because you're like, every day, shit, I need to up my game, and I need to be like working on this and working on that. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, these are the things that I need to work on. But I sure as hell know that there's somebody that I can send a message and be like, hey man, like, can you help me with this? And the response you're going to get back is, by and large, yes, absolutely. What do you need?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I visited Beau a couple of years ago when I was in Colorado, and he kind of made this offhand remark that really made me laugh, where I was talking exactly about this kind of collegial feeling that we have with each other, and like everyone, because we have this similar sort of work life and similar economic life and everything, and we just all understand each other pretty readily. And he said, well, yeah, we all got on the wrong bus together. So, you know, but it's true. Like it really is kind of, it's intimidating, like you say, because I mean, especially, I mean, for me, like, I don't put myself in any categories when it comes to, like, you know, the people that are really pushing the boundaries, either at the level of craft or performance or whatever. I mean, there are people that I admire greatly in those areas. But having been doing it for like 20 years now, it's like, yeah, you look on Instagram and it's like, holy hell, like, you know, some of this stuff that these people are doing that have only been doing it for what seems like 20 minutes, you know, and you don't know how it sounds, or you don't know how it's going to hold together in 3 years, but it looks amazing online, you know.
That's why I've stopped following everybody on Instagram, because it was too painful. I'd open it up and I'd go, you know, it's got the label and it's like 3 or something. I'm like, man, it's hard. So yeah, I just stopped following everyone. Now I look at like pictures from the Louvre and stuff to get inspiration, instead of getting sad about some guy who's been doing it for 2 seconds or girl doing 2 seconds.
But I look at both of you guys, Martin and Beau, and think that you each have such a unique offering to the, you know, I mean, your guitars are just, they're defined by who you are. And like nobody can replace the artistry of Beau, right? And or Martin's interpretation of guitars and basses. I feel like they're just unique and unreplaceable. So in that regard, I feel like you shouldn't feel threatened in any way by anything that you see out there.
No, not threatened. It was more.
Yeah, it was maybe a bad word to use, but
more the.
Are you threatening me?
It doesn't matter if they are threatening us, if you feel they're threatened.
Or frustrated, or I mean, what is the right word to use? I guess, because I felt the same way. You know, I've just started Instagram recently, and I see what other builders are doing, and some of the. I guess it's only just aesthetically, right? It's what they're pulling off with the aesthetics and the inlay work or the designs, the artistry, I guess, and it's easy for me to feel like I need to dig a little bit deeper, or I don't know, that maybe I can't even pull that stuff off. You know,
there is an aspect of it that is driving. So you see something or a lot of things, and it fires you up to produce better work or like that. And at the moment, I'm trying to have that feeling without looking at what everyone else is doing and comparing myself to them. And that's just sort of a personality trait. But yeah,
it's such a difficult one. I think everybody that I speak to by and large feels this way to some degree. Even I had this revelatory conversation with a luthier recently, and we it almost like we'd become each other's nemesis, you know, without acknowledging it mutually. And eventually we got talking to each other, and we had this realization about each other, just like, man, like I see your work and I'm like, oh, it's so great. And I just like, I always think to myself, man, if only I could do that. And if only I knew about this and that. And he was like, dude, I feel the same about you.
Right.
And it's so funny. And I think a lot of that has to do with, you know, the fact that we do work alone. You know, we're trying to take care of everything. And it's very easy to kind of get inside your own head and just to kind of mull stuff over because you are on your own a lot of the time, and it can become this really frustrating thing. So I completely empathize with you, but I've certainly been in that situation where I've just had to stop following everybody.
You know, it's funny because like I go through that a lot, as I guess we all do. But once I started doing a lot more repair, the priority in repair is sort of like the opposite, in the sense that like when you're building new instruments, and especially when you're trying to market yourself the way people have to do now, and which basically means you have to come up with photos that are this big that can still engage somebody, you know, there has been this real arms race with like, you know, guitar adornment, and some of it is incredible, you know, and there are guys who really like, guys like Michi, who they make these real kind of artistic statements and they establish this personality and they push the field with it too. I mean, the number of people that are influenced by Michi now is like amazing, considering he's like probably only halfway into his career, you know. But in repair, the object, the goal, the ideal is for the person doing the work to essentially disappear at the end of the job. And if you've done your work correctly, no one will ever know you're there, right? And so it's this completely different mindset and priority, where the instrument is not there to express the personality of the craftsman in any way. Instead, the person doing the work is like subservient to the history of the instrument and the facts as they are. And like the most amazing instrument related work I saw this last year was by Beau, you know what I'm talking about, Iris Carr.
Iris, yeah.
Oh my God. So she had this cello from the 1700s that had been modified at some point with a longer neck or something, and it was being put back to proper specification. And so somebody had recut the F holes higher up in the top. And she took this like 300 something year old cello, and she made these holes just disappear, and she moved them down about 1.5 inches or whatever it was. But when I say disappear, I mean disappear. You can follow every grain line right through where the holes used to be. There is not the ghost of a glue joint anywhere. The varnish is just like, you know, you can stare at the picture and try to find it, and you won't find it. And it was just like, I mean, there's not a new guitar I've ever seen that impressed me more than that. It was like a magic trick, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a level of craft that I think most of us in our field will probably never reach. And the whole idea is that you can't see it.
It's people like that. I would drop everything if I, you know, didn't have a family and another life or circumstances. I would drop everything and just be her apprentice, just to learn that skill, because it really is. That's what she did on that job, and any other job that she's done. I've looked through her entire sort of pictures. It's just like magical work. It's like she's got a wand and she can make things disappear. She comes in from the back and stuff. Germany. Yeah, she's on Instagram and Facebook. Iris.
Yeah, I saw the post. I think it was from Martin Hoover shared that that repair job that you're talking about. I saw that and was equally as amazed. I'd like to see more of what she's done. So
what was her second name?
Carr, Carr.
Yeah, that's I really like that that idea of kind of disappearing once the work is done.
Where I'm probably going artistically is getting away from the fancy stuff, and like at the moment I'm just building what people order, and that's great, but I'm trying to get back to like really simple, elegant things, and every time I've done that, I enjoy it a bit more than doing a fancy inlay here and there and the end graft and that sort of thing. It's good for Instagram. You do little close-ups and stuff, and people like it. But I don't know. It's all about how happy I am at the end of the day.
Well, there you go.
Well, that's something I've always appreciated about your work, Tom, is the sort of the clarity of the design work, and that it's not like there's no excess visually. It's just like this clean statement, and it has a distinct personality, but there's no fluff. It's like you and guys like Ted Astrand and guys like that are working in that kind of vein of like, I wouldn't even call it minimalist, because that almost has a sort of negative connotation in some ways, but it's just like I said, the clarity of the design, you know what I mean? That it's just a very kind of direct, well executed, well conceived thing that is just allowed to exist without, puffery.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I'm glad. Well, I'm glad that's how it comes across. I mean, increasingly, I'm wanting to, as Beau was alluding to, move more in that kind of direction, and kind of strip away the superfluous, and just allow the materials to speak for themselves, and to let the guitar do the talking, but have it executed to the very highest level. I mean, one of the reasons that my work is the way that it is because I'm just not very good at the really intricate stuff. I remember when I was working with Irvin, I thought to myself, well, this is the kind of work that I'm expected to do, loads of elaborate carvings and inlays and endless miters and all this kind of thing. And so at the very start of my building with Irvin, I remember trying to do a soundboard with a chip carved tiger like around the sound hole. And I got, really into it, and spent ages designing it, and got my scalpels and set out for the night, like, okay, I'm not gonna stop until this is finished. And I just spent so long doing it. And at the end of it, I was kind of like a bit deflated and underwhelmed, because A, I didn't enjoy doing it. B, it didn't look very good. And C, it was clear that it was just trying to do something that the master was doing, and it just didn't hang together cohesively in any way, shape or form. And so it didn't tally in with all the things I'd learned through design school, and the people that I really admire, people like Dieter Rams, these kind of a lot of Germans, who would just kind of form follows function, and focusing on the materials, and so for me that's increasingly where I'm trying to go, and in some ways it's almost more difficult to keep things simple.
It's psychologically it's the best way to jump in the deep end of Lutherie if you're a young guy or girl starting out, because it's impressive doing all the fancy stuff. And I think that's probably a natural progression from fancy to better design, or better design, which typically leads into a more simplified look.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's been my journey. Yeah. Hopefully I'm trending in the direction of of simplifying. I think when I first started, I would draw a design and then make it happen. But achieving that cohesive, sort of classy classy look. Yeah, there was a point when I really thought, man, this is not going to look good in 5 years. You know, it probably doesn't even look good right now. Outside of my own eyeballs, right? To somebody else's eye. And I looked at like one builder in particular, Jeff Troggett, and his guitars, just being, you know, just so classy and classic. And I just realized that I want to be heading in that direction, of hopefully this looks good in 10, 15 years, you know, whatever it is that I've done, and learning to have the restraint. I think that's hard. It's been hard for me, I think. But Tom, I was going to say about your guitars, Tom, I really admire and I appreciate your color choices, I guess, you know, the way that you put colors together like an artist with a palette of colors. I remember the first time I saw your guitars, right? It was at in Memphis in 2015. You were there, right?
No,
I hope so. Were you there?
No.
You weren't there? No. Where did I see? I thought for sure it was there. I saw one of your guitars with a like bright red veneer on the back of the headstock or some bold color. Huh?
Yeah.
And that just,
I remember that.
No, I wasn't there, but it might have just been online. I don't know, but I thought for sure it was in person. But yeah, we've never met, have we?
No, I don't think we've met.
Anyways, no. But I saw that, it just blew me away how how you just using color in that way could speak so loudly, but yet be a part of the entire guitar and not, you know, right? Not distract too much.
Sure.
Or just create that like perfect visual element that really speaks. So, and watching your videos, your woodlocker videos, you had one recently where you had pink ivory, and you know, you said that you were excited to use that, which I don't think I've ever seen pink ivory used. I'm sure it has been. I have a piece. I haven't
amazing stuff.
It is. It's so dense and finely textured, right?
Yeah.
And the color's really unique and cool. Why haven't I used it? I don't know. I just haven't been courageous enough, I guess. But yeah, that's one thing that I see in your guitars that I really like and appreciate is cohesiveness and choice of color, putting woods together that complement each other really well. I really like that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. One thing that, I kind of, you cut out just as I finished the question, but, you know, we're talking previously about longevity, and I wondered, Ryan, about how you've approached designing the guitar, because it sounds like you're largely self-taught, or you know, you've kind of not had like a Luthierie mentor, perhaps. And so I'm just wondering how you've gone about solving or approaching some of the technical problems that we see with the acoustic guitar.
Yeah, you're right. I haven't had a mentor, technically speaking. How have I approached it? A big thing for me, I think, is the rim assembly. I think it's, in my mind, it has to be a vital part of the construction and engineering of the guitar. So, Martin, I wanted to ask you, when you were talking earlier about the failure of the guitars that you see come through your shop that can have, you know, overly thick tops, braces, and whatnot. But I guess the question I had in my head was, what do you think about the side construction of those guitars? Because in my mind, now I'm not a repair person, and I've seen, you know, very few, limited amount of guitars in my day. But it seems like the rim is what is twisting and contorting and bending to allow a top to dive in, right, or a back to flatten out. So what do you, in those guitars that you see fail, how does because you didn't mention the rim, but how do you view the rim fitting into that problem?
That's a good question. Definitely, anytime a guitar comes in that has a crack in the rim, amount of stress that is being handled by the rim, because of the amount of like dimensional change that happens, across the crack. You know what I mean? Like the rim is very clearly playing a big role there. I've been meaning to play with that whole new like structured side thing that people are doing. And you guys know Benoit Lavoie?
Sure.
Have you ever played his guitars?
I played. I think it was perhaps a baritone. It was a big guitar, overclock top.
They're pretty outrageous.
Yeah.
Like they have a lot to say. And I remember a couple years ago at Woodstock, the room at Woodstock is very hustly, bustly, lots of noise. You can hardly hear yourself. And then every like 10 minutes, I would hear this like thump.
Yep.
I was like, what the hell is that? And I finally realized about halfway through the day that it was Benoit, and part of his little sales pitch was he would pick up this flat top guitar and go like this on the bridge. And every time he did that, I would hear this thump like halfway across the room. I was like, oh my God, and Benoit doing laminated sides and super rigid rims, that the guitar's performance increased dramatically. And I would think that between, seeing what happens across cracks and, all of that less has to be passed on to the top and back. And so, there's not much you can do with the rim of a factory built guitar. But let's say I'm optimistic that with all these very lightly built guitars that are being made now in small shops like ours, that the stiffer rims may help alleviate some of those problems that I see coming in with factory guitars, because it's not just the rim. Obviously, it's also the top, but the rim would only have to help take some of that stress away.
Yeah.
But I know there are other people like who are building. I know at least one guy who's making super light, super responsive guitars that have extremely thin sides, like 65 or 70 thousandths.
Oh, wow.
And those guitars are hyper responsive too. So shows you what I know.
The Torres sides are like 1 mil, 40 thou, which is crazy. I don't know how he did that, or how that's hung around for so long.
I remember I was also at Woodstock in 18, Martin, and I remember being at Benoit's table, and I picked up one of his guitars. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay. And I tapped on the back, and I'm telling you, it was like a tom drum. The thing was just so huge, and I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. Right. So that was impressive. Yeah. But yeah, so for me, the rim assembly has been important. I looked at Burton Leggett's. Help me pronounce his name. Is it Leggett? Is it Leggett? Leggett. Okay, it is Leggett. Sorry, Burton. I'm
like a French airplane.
Butchering your name, Leggett. Okay. I saw his earlier on in my career. I saw his rim assembly, and it just really struck me, and I thought it was really smart. The oversized neck block with the extensions out the side of the neck block. Yeah. Right. And then he also does his tail block is like probably 6 inches wide. I don't know. Yeah. So I grabbed a hold of that idea right off the bat, and I've been doing that with my neck blocks. My neck blocks are 8 inches wide on a like 15.5-inch size guitar, right, on a non-cutaway. And it just makes sense to me that if you eliminate the ability of the upper bout to flex on each side of the neck block, then the force is transferred to a vertical plane or to the side of the upper bout, which can't twist. That right. right? The neck can twist on each side of the neck block, but when you transfer that load to the side of the upper bout, then it's really restricted. It can't flex like this, right?
Yeah.
So so I really like that idea. I've been using that. What else? I don't know.
Well, that also feeds into, like Beau was saying, avoiding those cracks on both sides of the fretboard from that torquing moment that's happening at the neck, because that's a huge job you're asking that little bit of wood to do, and then it's just such a horrible thing to have to repair. So like moving that load out away from, like, to beyond the edges of the hole is super valuable.
Yeah.
Ryan, I saw it just a few weeks ago, I can't remember. Does the upper transverse brace is here, does your head block kind of come like this and butt up against the transverse brace?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's really sculptural.
And then
whenever I see photos of the inside of your guitars, I'm like, damn, well, they look really clean, but also just the lines and the kind of sweep, and yeah, really, really elegant solution.
Yeah, they could maybe be a little bit lighter weight, but maybe I'll get there eventually.
Are you using mahogany?
I don't think it. Mahogany. Yeah, I did use Spanish cedar for a while, but I really maybe you guys could help answer this question. But I really question the glue strength of a cedar Spanish cedar glue joint, because when I was making my neck blocks with Spanish cedar, I could pull a joint apart with my hands. And have you guys experienced that with Spanish cedar? I know, necks have been made out of Spanish cedar for a long time.
What kind of glue?
No? Tight bond.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unimportant. You can cut that out, Tom.
No, it's interesting stuff. I've had that with Western red cedar, but obviously that's a totally different species.
Yeah.
I've thought about that problem. I do laminated sides and epoxying up the sides and then that bleeding through and then gluing a head block or tail block to that sort of has worried me in the past, but I haven't had any actual trouble with it, but something that's sort of on my mind.
Well, I've noticed that you're doing something similar that I've just started doing as well, where you notching the head block and the tail block over the laminate, so cutting away the lamination at the intersection of the sides and the block, but then having like a little rebate or a rabbet.
Yeah.
So it kind of traps the lamination, but you're actually gluing to the outside skin. I've seen that on your work, I'm sure.
Yeah. There's probably a picture here. So if people watching, if you don't have this book, just buy it. It's really good. It's expensive though, but in Australia, we stop the kinking of the top telegraphing at the tail block. We used to put like a strap over I was talking to Ryan about this the other day.
Mm-hmm.
We used to put a strap over the tail block and the linings would kind of, here we go. The linings would go over it like that. So it sort of becomes, in relation to the top gluing to it, it's a bit like what Burton does with that larger tail block, and there's no sort of weird kinking that can happen, but it's a little bit problematic just with the birch plywood and stuff and solid linings to do that. But now I'm doing the rebated sort of cut in. Actually, I use a Dremel with a ball bit at the moment, but I'm going to start routing. It actually looks a lot nicer as well when you look inside, because even if you try and get it nice when you're gluing in the linings, there's always some sort of problem that arises. So yeah, that was a trick by Michael Bashcom. I was chatting to him about it and he was saying, oh, I did this. So I'm like, oh, it's a good idea.
One of the questions that came through was about biggest challenges that you guys have had, whether that's, you know, a build that just wasn't happy, or you know, just a crazy build that you've tried to execute. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced and had to overcome, would you say?
First thing that, or a couple things come to mind in my mind. I recently went down the road of wanting to do my own finish work again. I had sprayed my guitars for, I don't know, the first 30, 35 guitars. And I was working at a cabinet shop in the time, so I had a decent space to do it, and it all worked just fine. And it was okay. But for the past few years, I've been working with finishers to do my finish work, which is really awesome because, you know, I get to send them off and they come back perfect and no stress. But I wanted to start doing like a really thin oil finish, just with the attempts of just a different approach to finishing a guitar and looking at it just a little bit differently. So yeah, this was last year. I had 3 or 4 guitars that I did an oil varnish finish, and it was tough. I did one guitar 3 times until I was finally happy with it. So I think starting a new process like that, especially with finish work, is just, it's going to require a lot of effort and mistakes. One thing I'm always reminding myself of is that you have to make every mistake possible at least once, and sometimes twice. But it's going to happen. Like, every mistake that can happen, it will happen at some point. So you have to just work through that. The other thing that comes to mind is when I bought my CNC machine. That was probably a good 3 months of my time that year, just getting to know the machine, learning to program tool paths, working through problems, writing programs, you know, drawing everything that I needed to draw to be able to use, you know, to do what I wanted to do with the machine. So a huge investment in time and energy just to make that tool useful. That was pretty tough. But I'm thankful that I have it now. It's a really useful tool to have. So.
How big is it? What kind of size are we talking?
It's a Laguna IQ, and it's a 24 by 36 inch bed. So
do you have the ATC for it?
No, just manual change, which it doesn't really bother me. It's easy enough, I feel like, so it doesn't bother me too much.
I want an automatic tool changer so badly.
Yeah, it would be cool for sure. Just be able to turn the air off and, you know, change the collets quickly.
Do you guys know Tom Dahlia at the Gallup School? I think his handle on Instagram is Freddie Mercury. Have you seen the CNCs that they have at the Gallup School? They just got a new one with like a super fancy auto tool changer, and it's huge. But some of the stuff that he's doing with that machine is crazy.
It is amazing what they can do. And, you know, I mean, it's a whole subject of like market perception and like clients' ideas about like the place of CNC in this kind of work, you know, and there are a lot of people that really don't want to hear about it. There are other people that use them that don't want to talk about it. Every now and then I'll spot one in the corner on somebody's Instagram. I'll be like, hey, you're busted, you know, but like Ryan, I kind of dove in with CNC about a year ago. And I was lucky. It happened. I bought it like a month before taking out a loan to buy a machine. Like, I'd always just bought stuff outright before. And realistically, once the pandemic happened, I would have been too risk averse to make the investment. It would have seemed like a crazy idea. But as it was, I got it, and I'm really, really glad I did, because it's been extremely useful. I build electric instruments too, and especially for those, like, there really is no other tool that is more appropriate at this point. I used to have a big monstrous pin router that was a wonderful tool, but you know, CNC, it's like if you're trying to make a living making cars, there's kind of no reason not to have one. And you can't really build a meaningfully good acoustic guitar using only a CNC machine. All it does is save you a little time here and there. The rest of the work is, you know, handwork and close attention. So, you know, I think it's a great move, and the software, it's all getting more accessible. So, you know, I jumped in and haven't looked back.
Beau, I think we talked about CNC before. What's your feeling about CNC machines?
I don't have one. I don't think I have the brain to be proficient at it. I would like one, because at Gillette Guitars we used to just have bridges made, and we just grabbed a bridge and it was done, and it was just so handy. And if you had necks and stuff, I'm not. What Martin mentioned about perception of from the world about CNCs, you either think that it doesn't make a difference to the sound for, like, you know, just roughing out parts and stuff, components, or you think that guitars are made by old men with beards by candlelight and they're polished by virgins at midnight in fog.
Oh no, we do that here in Yorkshire. That's
I
yeah.
thought,
oh yeah.
Europe, Stonehenge and stuff. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
It's Stonehenge rubbed.
Yeah.
I fall sort of somewhere between those two extremes in regard to their place. If I was making electric guitars, I would be CNC'd. That would just be my life. It would be the only way to do it, I think. Not saying they're not as soulful or anything, but just I think as long as the top is on an acoustic guitar, as long as the top is sort of worked by hand, you're going to come out with something good. Well, you're on the path to something good. Anyone can screw up anything. Yeah.
So to finish up, the overwhelming question that came in was to do with, and we mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, was getting started as a luthier, and I wondered if you guys could share a little nugget of wisdom based on your collective experiences to what could you pass on to someone looking to get started in this career of ours?
I'd say buy as many books as you can and read them all. I had a massive collection in Australia, but I only brought over a couple of, like, the big red books and the Gillette guitar books and stuff.
Do you have one that you think is the book? If you're going to buy the first book, which would you say?
Where is it? I think it's upstairs next to my bed, so I can't show you. But my favorite book is the Building Great Guitars, Roy McConnell something. I forget the name of it now. Making Master Guitars, I think it's called. It's actually a classical guitar book, but when I started making steel strings, I just made steel strings, and one of my personality flaws is that I disregard everything I'm not interested in, and so for a long time I was steel string, so I didn't think about classical or electric or the violin world or anything like that. I just sort of tunnel vision. But once I started getting orders for ukes, I started thinking about ukes, and then started thinking about classical guitars from that. And I just realized that that the more you know about every single type of instrument, it's a bit like Martin with repairs, the more you know, the more you know. And so, yeah, people ask me all the time on Instagram, what should I do? I'm starting out, and I just say, just buy as many books and read them. Samoji books are good, and the Trevor Gore Gillette guitar books are good, but they're, you know, all up it's about $600 for those 3 books. So it's kind of an investment, but I don't know.
How about you, Ryan? Words of wisdom.
Don't give up.
Yeah, there you go. Mine?
That's about, sorry, I don't know. I think that's just, I mean, my own journey has been, you know, I feel like it's been a long 10 years. And I only went completely full-time on my own in 2017. So, you know, that span of 2009 to 2017, it was kind of a bumpy road. You know, I knew it was something I knew I loved doing, and I didn't have another vocation of choice. So I had a very supportive wife that we had just, you know, had just been married in 2010. And we both agreed that we wanted to be self-employed and doing something that we really loved and enjoyed doing. So that was really important to us. Yeah, so it was, you know, working little part-time jobs, a couple days a week, and then trying to build the next guitar, you know, in the dingy little basement with not enough clamps or tools, or not the best materials, or yeah. So a supportive spouse is a good thing to have too. Got to have that. I'm really thankful for that. And then just look for open opportunities to keep pursuing your craft, and you know, you got to look for open doors too. Like the big one for me was meeting a cabinet maker who wanted to have me work in his shop and actually pay me to make guitars. So I think I had made 9 guitars, and I needed a job. We were expecting our first child, and so it was kind of getting a little more serious at that point, having to provide, and so I met this cabinet maker and close to me here, and he had an interest in guitars, and he put me to work in his shop and paid me hourly to build guitars, and I did that for almost 4 years, which really, like, without that, I wouldn't be here today, without having that opportunity to build more guitars and just get them out there and get paid to be able to do that.
How about you, Martin?
Yeah, in terms of getting started,
Yeah.
It's funny. I've had the good fortune to be writing an article every couple of months for Acoustic Guitar, answering reader questions, and one of them a couple of months ago was about this very thing. So I had to sort of sit there and distill kind of what I could say in 800 words about my best suggestions. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I think one of the best things somebody can do early on is start fixing guitars that have already been made. It teaches you like the vocabulary of how they're built. It gives you like kind of a chance to learn about tools and how to use them, and glues and how to use them. And it is by far an easier way to make any kind of money than making new instruments. And that, to me, feeds back to what Ryan was saying about don't give up. And I think what gets most of us through that is the motivation and the inspiration and the excitement we have about doing it, and how, you know, how much we can invest ourselves personally in doing this thing that probably isn't making us any money for at least the first few years. And that level of personal investment is valuable as a motivator, but it's also a little risky because it allows you to overlook the parts of the process that could make it a sustainable business model. So like, as fun as it is to, like, I used to not eat lunch because I was so into doing the job, you know, and as fun as it is to like just be there working and be so focused and dedicated and invested in it, like I think the sooner you learn to disconnect a little bit from like having the work be like part of your soul, you know what I mean? And you want it to be your job and you want to love your job, but you also, it has to work for you, you know what I mean? And you can't just be a slave to this like dream of making the perfect guitar, you know? So I agree totally with Beau, like get as much information as you can, and really try to absorb it. And I agree totally with Ryan, like don't give up, don't quit. And doing those two things together, you know, along with that, just try to like, you know, find a reasonable path forward that doesn't require you to be a starving artist, because otherwise you're basically depending on the people around you to support you.
It's very sage advice, Martin.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to chat and for bearing with us throughout the technical difficulties. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, this was fun. It's, you know, we haven't had guitar shows in over a year, so it's like nice to see some of your guys' faces, you know.